So it's no secret that the dream of home ownership is slipping away for millions, as the average house today sells for over $500,000, which is how we got here.
The age of a first-time home buyer is the oldest it has ever been. The median age is now 40 years old.
The share of first-time home buyers has dropped to 21%, a record low.
And while all of this is bad, it gets worse, because only a couple of years ago, the average age of a first-time homebuyer was 35 years old. Last year, it was 38. And today, it's 40. All of which begs the question, what is going on in the housing market? Was it rigged? The short answer is yes. And if you don't believe me, then listen to the president say the quiet part out loud.
You have a lot of people have housing that because we have such a strong time and such a strong market, their houses are very valuable. It's a big part of their net worth. I don't want to knock those numbers down.
But does it have to be this way? Do we need to sacrifice the ability for the youth to achieve the American dream in order to protect the wealth of the elderly? And how do we even get into this situation to begin with, for that matter? By the end of this video, you'll know the answer to each of these questions, beginning with the basics. Now, to understand how we got here, we need to go back in time for just 1 second, but trust me, it's going to be worth it. Back in the 80s, when the home ownership rate was around 66%, the average house, depending on the year, would sell for anywhere from 1.5 to 3 times as much as the average household income was in that time period, meaning that a normal person working a normal job could conceivably afford to buy their own home in the 80s. But obviously things have changed. I mentioned earlier that the average house now sells for over $500,000, which is a full 6.1 times more than the average household income of today, meaning all things being equal, we can honestly say that the typical home in the mid-2020s sells for roughly 2 to 4 times as much as the typical home would have sold for in the 80s, which, put a different way, means that for someone to purchase a house now, they need to be in a far stronger financial position than they would have needed to be in only a couple of decades ago, which is why Gen Zers and Millennials are struggling to purchase their own homes. But what's really weird about all of this is that a lot of this was because the government wanted it to be this way. So what you're looking at right now are a bunch of maps of the most populated cities in the United States. Now, I'm gonna guess that something probably stands out to you. Probably all this pink stuff. So what does it actually represent? Well, put simply, anything that's shown in pink on these maps are areas that have been designated by the local governments as being able to only contain single-family homes, like this one, or this one, or this one, but very importantly, not like this. Now, the idea here is simple and it honestly makes sense. Most people don't want a skyscraper to go up right next door to their house they just bought. But the problem arises when we realize how many areas and cities with huge populations are zoned exclusively for single-family homes. I mean, just look at these maps again. We're artificially suffocating the amount of supply that can hit the market for places for people to live, which in turn drives up the price. And considering the price of houses is the reason why people can't afford to buy a house, well, then all this really means is that local governments are choosing to preserve current home values over allowing more places to be built, which would give younger people more access to buying their own home. And that's only the first of 4 reasons why house prices are absurdly high. Because even when we allow people to build houses in our cities, there's just not enough people who want to build regular homes that young people could afford. Because following the 2008 financial crisis, basically the entire building industry collapsed.
People today, 10 years later, they're still affected by the crisis, various people in different ways, but they're not as affected as they were in 2009 or 2010.
Has that confidence come back?
Yeah, but it comes back slowly.
Has that confidence come back?
Yeah, but it comes back slowly.
So in short, after the 2008 financial crisis, banks realized that giving out loans to anyone and their brother was maybe not such a good idea, especially because the government kind of didn't want to buy those loans anymore. So what they did is start becoming a lot more conservative with who they'll let build houses on their money. Now the problem is, most builders in America at this point were not major corporations. They were local small-time builders who would build so many houses in a year. But they couldn't afford to keep operating without loan assistance. And so when the banks quit giving them those loans, they went out of business. And that had the trickle-down effect of meaning all of our skilled contractors and subcontractors in this country basically were forced to find new jobs and left the industry entirely, which for years, all the way up to this point, has resulted in us just not having enough people who are willing and able to build homes. And that, again, in turn drives up the price of houses for young people who cannot afford them in the first place. See the problem? But people not being willing to build enough houses is only one side of the coin as to why there aren't enough houses on the market. The other side is that all of the many homes that are already in existence aren't becoming available for sale because people today are strongly disincentivized to ever sell their home if they can at all avoid it. Now, why is that? Well, that can be best explained by this graph. As you can see, mortgage interest rates only a few years ago reached the lowest point they have ever been at in recorded history, with over 2/3 of homeowners now having mortgages at less than a 4% interest rate. Now, why does this matter? Well, put simply, if you already own a home and have that rate of an interest rate and you decide to buy a new home to move into, well, then you're going to end up paying, because of a higher interest rate, tens of thousands, if not in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars more over the lifetime of your loan than you would if you just stayed where you are. And so, put simply, it would be a horrible decision financially to sell a house if you already have a 3 or 4% interest rate. And so not many people are willing to give up that great deal, and so they just won't sell their houses, which in turn means that a lot of inventory is out there that could go onto the market, but it just isn't. And because supply shortages result in higher prices, well, we're in a triple whammy of supply shortages today, where young people just do not have a lot of choices for what homes they wish to purchase, even if they could afford to do so. And sadly, there is one more reason why house prices are absurdly expensive. Because while we've talked about there being a supply shortage, there's also too much demand. Because according to the US Census Bureau, in the year 2000, there are around 281 million people living in the land of the free. Fast forward to today, and there are 60 million more people in the country. And while I am no Nobel-winning economist or mathematician, in my non-expert opinion, I would say that if you increase the population that drastically and you don't increase the supply of houses, well, demand is just going to continue to rise. That's known as why houses now sell for over $500,000 on average. But before we move on to solutions, there's one more graph I need to show you. What you're looking at right now isn't a graph showing the rise of housing prices in America. No, it's the amount of fraud and identity theft attempts reported to the government every year in the United States. As you can see, it's skyrocketing. And while many people think that's because people fall for scams online, as I learned when I was in banking, a large part of why people's identities are stolen these days aren't because of any fault of their own, but because there are malicious third parties out there who are buying your data actively from online data brokers who do not care how selling your private information hurts you. Which is why I partner with My Data Removal to bring you this video. They are an online service that for a very modest fee will go out and protect you from data brokers who will sell your information and who risk your identity being stolen. And so if you want to drastically reduce the likelihood of that happening to you, then use the link in the description to sign up for My Data Removal today. And with that said, let's return to the question I started this video with. Do we need to sacrifice the ability of the youth to achieve the American dream in order to protect the wealth of the elderly? Absolutely not. The share of wealth held by people below the age of 40 has already plummeted by 50% in only the last couple of decades. And if we continue to prioritize maintaining the wealth of people who are already wealthy over giving new opportunities to the people who have no opportunities existing for them, well, those numbers are only going to continue to worsen, which is why we must fix the 4 issues mentioned thus far in this video. The first thing we need to do is reduce massively the amount of single-family exclusively zoned areas in our cities. 80+% of cities should not be zoned for exclusively single-family residences. Because when the country has over 340 million people in it, well, there just needs to be places for people to live, and protecting neighborhoods, while important, cannot be the final goal. The goal must always be allowing the average person to live a good life. So we need to reduce across the board how many cities are zoning for exclusively letting people use single-family homes and prohibiting multifamily dwellings from being built. The second thing we need to do is increase the amount of construction loans that we are willing to give out. Already, the government basically dictates what loans are issued and not issued, and while that is a complicated subject, the thing that's relevant for this video is that the government needs to support the construction industry, because right now, we don't have enough construction, and we need to double the amount of new homes being built annually if we are going to combat this humongous deficit of houses on the market. Now, the third thing we need to do is probably the most ambitious thing I'm going to ask all video, which is that we need some consistency from the government. We already talked about how interest rates a few years ago went to record lows, and while that was designed to address the issues of the time, I bet if I asked you right now to name the exact issues economically America was facing 4 years ago, it would take you a few minutes to think through them. But we're actively now suffering from the repercussions of those low interest rates, and will be continuing to do so for years to come. And look, I'm not saying low interest rates are bad, but what we need is a consistent long-term strategy to address not just the needs of today, but the needs of 10 years from now. Because if we're always optimizing to fix the thing today, then we're just breaking stuff down the road, and that hurts the next generation who doesn't have the resources to handle those kind of situations. And the fourth thing we need to do is create policies designed not just on what today's population is, but based on what the population numbers are likely to look like in 20 years. Now, that sounds hard to do. We don't know what the birth rate's going to be every year, right? The thing is, for most forms of planning, we don't actually have to account for children because they aren't working, they're not buying homes, they're not paying taxes. And yet, we know 18 years after someone's born that they will enter into the workforce or into college. And so we can account for that. We just don't. We could have predicted, hey, our population numbers are going to look like this in 2025. Maybe we should realize that we'll need X amount of housing to accommodate that kind of population. But no one's doing that long-term planning, and we need to accommodate for the population changes, whether it's going up or down, because those fundamentally affect society as a whole, and our inability to make decisions based on those growth projections are fundamentally hurting our country. And while these policy suggestions wouldn't fix everything overnight, they don't need to. Rapid change is what destroys markets, and while we need short-term relief, we need long-term stability so these kind of things quit happening again. And maybe the most useful thing we can recognize is that if you buy a car and drive it off the dealer's lot, it immediately loses value. But somehow we have this expectation that if you purchase a home today, that you'll be able to sell it 30 years from now at a humongous profit, even though you've put decades of wear and tear on it. That conception must go away, because housing in the final analysis should not be looked at as an investment, but rather a place people live and raise a family. And it's up to us to demand not only that the government, but our financial markets recognize that reality as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing. And if you would like to hear more about how BlackRock and Blackstone, as well as other major corporations, are actively undermining the American dream, then I recommend that you watch this video right now. Hope to see you in that one. Have a great day.